Thank you very much, Hans, and it's a real pleasure to be here and to be able to share the views from India on this important subject. I just wanted to say that since you wanted to look at examples of international cooperation, I think it would be wonderful if we are able to find a way in which we can have more Chancellor Merkel think-alikes and do-alikes in leadership positions in the world, because I think that would take care of a lot of the problems that we are talking about. But anyway, I think nearly 4 years ago we made a study in India that spoke about the fact that there is a huge opportunity for the country to move to alternative development pathways. And of course, the reason for that was that given its state of development, given its state of infrastructure, the degrees of flexibility or the degrees of freedom are a lot more in India than in several other developed countries to be able to bring about the kinds of transformations that we are talking about. Having said that, I think that particular report which we had presented in Poznan also highlighted the need for very, very strong international cooperation and identified a number of areas in which international cooperation would actually facilitate the kinds of transformations that we are talking about. I'm not going to go through the recommendations of that report because it is available on the website, but I agree completely with the point made by Dirk that today the techno-economic feasibility of making the kinds of transformations that we need is more real than ever before. Problem remains with financing and the financing mechanisms as well, and still remains there. But I think the more important problem that we are probably not giving enough attention to is the politico-institutional systems that need to be in place in order to support this kinds of transformation that we are talking about. And while we have done a lot of work on looking at technology, finance, etc., there has not been enough of an attention that has been paid to changes in governance that are required, to changes in the political systems and the institutions that we have that have been designed to take care of the problems of the 20th century, really, not the problems of the 21st century. So I think we need to be able to involve much larger communities in this debate, including the political scientists who are not at the fore as yet as far as this particular debate is concerned, I think. But so how do we go about bringing that change is a real challenge. When I look at India specifically, I think there are a number of actions that the country is already taking which speak to the fact that they do believe that there is a real threat in the form of climate change and that action needs to be taken. We have the National Action Plan on Climate Change and 8 missions that define specific areas of intervention that, again, I'm not going to go through because it covers almost everything that we need to be able to do in terms of directions as far as climate change is concerned. But I think there is a huge gap between what is still a very ambitious program that the government of India has and what is it that needs to be done if we are to remain in the 2 degrees Celsius guardrail that you were talking about earlier. And as I think in the case of every other country in the world, the major contributions to low carbon economy would come from the following sectors. I mean, urbanization and transport systems is one key area. In India, we are looking at doubling the population in urban areas in the next 20-odd years. We have still very low levels of ownership of vehicles. And both these transformations give us the opportunity to see how is it that we can do things differently. And in both these areas, I think there's a huge opportunity for international cooperation once again. Because when we are looking at either expanding existing cities, which seems a very difficult task to do, given the densities of populations that we already have in our cities, or building new cities, we have to be able to come up with city structures that integrate environmental and energy considerations intrinsically into the whole planning and implementation process. But there is a huge capacity gap, I think, that exists in the country in being able to do this, not only in terms of human resources, but also in the institutional design that we have that results in the decision makers in these areas actually taking very siloed kinds of decisions and having very different performance benchmarks that comes in the way of this kind of a integrated urban development pattern. In the area of transport, of course, we are investing a fair amount in the cities on public transport systems, but it is nowhere close to what is required to be done. And I think that there again lies a huge challenge, in this case, of course, of finance, but again also of designing the right kinds of public transport systems or mass transit transport systems. Just because the city of Delhi has a swanky new metro system does not mean that every other city in the country aspires to this to the same kind of a system. But again, points to the lack of capacity that we have and the need to build something over there, and also the opportunity for international cooperation. Given the fact that we have this very low level of vehicle ownership, why is it that we cannot think about actually mandating a number of the global automobile manufacturers to focus almost exclusively on very efficient small vehicles that are either running on electricity or on hybrid systems, and therefore reduce the pressure on the transportation systems and on energy in a country like India. So, why is it that we are not able to arrive at agreements in these areas at a global level? I think this is a question that we need to ask ourselves. In the case of industry, of course, there are again huge opportunities. We have implemented a perform, achieve, and trade scheme that is equivalent to an emissions trading scheme, but built around energy efficiency considerations. But once again, there is a huge gap that would remain to be filled up. And industry, I was mentioning in an earlier meeting of industry representatives in the US actually, that industry and the government have had fairly well-defined roles and responsibilities in society. Going forward, I think there is a real opportunity, or there is a real need for these roles and responsibilities to blur and not be as, typecast as they have been in the past, because the partnerships that we are talking about that are required to bring about the transformations would mean that there is a much greater degree of cooperation between the public and the private sectors. We can't talk about public-private partnership only in financial terms, but we have to be able to look at how each is working to meet the objectives of the other as well. We have a major program on green buildings in the country, which has been mandated by the Cabinet Secretary for all public sector buildings, that there is a certain 3-star rating that has to be followed by all public buildings. But once again, I think the opportunities over here are huge, and particularly if we are to integrate renewable energy into the building sector, because the building sector in India is going to grow at 10 to 11%. There was a recent exercise that we did for the state of Gujarat in the western part of India, where we developed an integrated renewable energy plan. And when we went through a proper scientific exercise, looking at land use planning, looking at the water resources that are available, looking at the infrastructure in terms of roads and electricity grids, etc., we were able to pinpoint renewable energy potential of about 700 gigawatts for that particular state against earlier estimates of less than 100 gigawatts. So there is a huge potential, but what it also requires then, if we are to be able to exploit it, is that every wing of the government actually works in tandem to see how this can be exploited, which includes the municipalities, which includes the building councils, which includes a number of other players. And again, as I mentioned earlier, just as an illustration, we are not geared to be able to work in this particular fashion. I'll just stop by saying that there are also areas like water supply, sewage, and sanitation, where energy intensity and energy consumption levels are extremely high. We need alternative business models. We have developed business models for delivery of these services that are extremely energy intensive in an era where energy was not such a major concern. Going forward, we have to see how we can develop more decentralized service delivery models that would take care of this. And in a similar fashion, I would like to emphasize the whole issue of energy access. Naki, I'm sure, will talk about it in the context of the Sustainable Energy for All initiative later. But for India, I think one of the major challenges is that we have nearly 700 million people who don't have access to clean cooking energy solutions, and about 400 million to 450 million people who don't have electricity in their homes. We have to be able to provide them with clean energy options, modern energy options, and that's where the social dimension comes in very strongly and links up to this whole area. And we have to be able to ensure that not only are we meeting their basic needs, but we are also meeting their productive energy needs. And that brings me to the final point, which is that the small and medium enterprise sector is going to be extremely important and will remain extremely important, but it is one sector that does not get enough attention as far as investments in R&D and being able to bring about the transformations is concerned. This is another area where I think international cooperation and the setting up of international mechanisms for supporting efficient technology development for the size and scale of this particular sector can go a very long way in contributing to reducing emissions from here. So thank you very much.